Hello everyone, Floppy Waffles 69 here and welcome back to the channel guys. Today we are going to be doing a full deep dive review on the Tier 10 Royal Navy heavy cruiser, the Monmouth or Monmouth. This is a ship that was originally sold or brought to the game in a Admiral bundle that was insanely expensive, probably cost you about a kidney or so. And then kind of gone for about, I don't know, 6, 8, maybe a year, like 6, 8 months or a year or whatever. And then now finally Wargaming, along with the Incheon, the Gonzaga, a lot of these older, like premium ships they were hidden behind paywalls, made its way back to the game into the premium store for direct purchase. Of course, the direct purchase price, as this is a tier 10 ship, is going to cost you 26,300 doubloons. That is the same as the Incheon that I reviewed about a week or so ago, which if you want to go ahead and check that video out, I will go ahead and link that in the description. Um, so what is the Monmouth, basically? What is this ship? Kind of does it do? That sort of stuff. Basically, what I came up with, and I'm sure there's other reviews I'm sure you've seen out there here in the last, 2 to 3 weeks. People are probably making their, Monmouth reviews or whatever. But basically, what this ship is it borrows the Gibraltar hull, um, who drops the smokescreen that the Gibraltar has, and picks up a super heel with slightly altered armor-piercing shells. Is basically what this ship is and what it does. Um, Obviously, way back in the day when this ship was in development hell, I believe Wargaming tested this ship with HE, high explosives, which would have created a slightly different play style than what we have already in the research bureau in the form of the Gibraltar. But Wargaming dropped that and said, you know what we can do instead? We can directly power creep a ship that you can theoretically get for free in the research bureau, and instead repackage it and sell it in the armory for fucking Admiral bundle, and then 26,300 doubloons later here a year later. And then that's of course in Wargaming's infinite greedy wisdom, that is what they did. And they ended up doing that. And I don't know if people have been falling for it or whatnot, but they obviously, I've been seeing a fair amount more of the Monmouth sailing around in the seven seas here, fighting in random battles, especially. Um, it's interesting because this ship, at least in my opinion, is actually not a bad ship. And I'm also kind of one of those weird players that actually enjoys the Gibraltar, even though you look at the, I guess, reviews from other content creators or from Reddit or from back in the day when they had the forums. I think the general consensus is that Gibraltar is a very average to shit ship, like absolute garbage. And I can see why the thought process is that. Don't get me wrong. I think that whole ship's, I guess, development or like what Wargaming went with their style is kind of weird. Obviously, I'm not a fan of smoke firing heavy cruisers, and the Gibraltar being no exception, having a 9.5 kilometer smoke firing penalty, it doesn't work. Like basically, the consumable loadout that ship has, it just doesn't really work, and I think it encourages the wrong sort of play style on that ship. Don't worry, down the road, I will 100% make a Gibraltar guide. Do I think you should pick up the Gibraltar? No, probably not. I would wait until that's one of the last ships that you have yet to pick up on the research bureau, even if you are a cruiser main, such as myself. But I think there is still fun to be had in it, and I think it is still a decently fun ship if you understand the ship fundamentally. It's definitely not going to win any awards, just like in my opinion, the Monmouth is not going to win any awards. But between the two big ships that came to the game here recently for direct purchase in the armory, you have the Incheon and the Monmouth. I would probably say the Monmouth is just the more fun ship, at least in my opinion. It's a more interactive play style. It feels more rewarding when you're playing it. And again, like I've said this already once this video, I'm going to say it again. I'm not a big fan of smoke firing heavy cruisers, and I really don't like it. That thing is just a smoke griefer through and through, where the Monmouth is a little bit more opportunistic in regards of its play style. And it is interesting because it is rather limited with its AP only, so its AP better have some good characteristics. And don't worry, the AP is quite good on this ship. But it does have some flaws, and one major flaw being that it's not short fused at all, so it's not going to penetrate. I think the minimum threshold on the ship is 25 millimeters in order to have an AP detonation. Unless it DDs angle to you and you're able to pen that, which most of the time you're just going to ricochet, you're just going to get overpens, which this thing can still slap for about 4,000 to 5,000 damage if you land the vast majority of your shells. I mean, you have, what, 12 of them on this ship on a DD, but most of the time you're just going to get overpen damage, and you're not really going to be able to do that much of AP damage to destroyers. That's really the one big weakness of this ship. But um, I'll go through the ship. I'll be comparing it directly to the Gibraltar, so you both can kind of see what this ship is, and kind of the differences, if there are any, between that and the Gibraltar. And the main differences are going to come in the consumable loadout and the artillery. But basically what I'm going to show you with the hull, it needs to be stressed, okay? The hull is not very good. This is a large ship, not hard to miss, pretty damn detectable, and I would highly recommend that you don't do a full stealth build, and I'll get into that when I talk about the commander build. But as you can see, you have a 25mm nose, you have a 25mm ass, you have a 30mm armor belt, and a 30mm deck armor. And again, if we end up going and showing you the Citadel, yeah, you have a little bit of a step Citadel here. Well, quite a large step Citadel, with only 178mm of armor belt. This ship will eat Citadels if you're not angled appropriately, and even if you are angled appropriately, the overmatch mechanic really shits on this ship. This ship kind of sits, kind of like bows out like an ellipse, so it's not hard to penetrate the nose with large caliber AP, especially if you overmatch 25mm of armor. Just point your cursor right on the nose of this thing, because there's a good chance you're going to get a Citadel. That's just what these kind of class of the Gibraltar and the Monmouth do. And just going to the Gibraltar, just so you can see, it shares an identical armor scheme, except that the Gibraltar does pick up a 40mm deck, which I like. The only problem with that is that when it comes to armor piercing bombs, yeah, this thing will eat way more in regards to the armor piercing bombs. Looking at you like the Richtofen or whatever, Manfred Richtofen, and even the Parseval honestly shits on this thing pretty heavily too. Hakuryu, you know what I'm talking about. You get the gist. 178 again on its Citadel, and again we look at the Citadel, step Citadel, not very hard to miss and or hit. So you have to be careful when using these ships. Your angling is going to be your best friend, and you're going to be doing active maneuvering. But again, the Gibraltar doesn't really encourage that, because the Gibraltar has a smoke screen, so it's weird, right? It's very, very weird. Again, your total hit points on the Monmouth are coming in at 59,400, with again a torpedo protection damage reduction, which is abysmal at 13%. But again, you are just a cruiser, so keep that in mind. Every other stat is going to be identical with the Gibraltar, and I'll just go in and talk about the maneuverability and the rudder shift real quick. Your rudder shift is 12.6 seconds, and your turning circle radius is 840 meters, and you do get the improved acceleration on this ship with 10.4 seconds. Now, this is worth talking about on both these ships. This is one of the only ships that I have never seen the bleeding, and when I'm talking about bleeding is the amount of speed that you drop when in a turn. I don't think this ship drops very much speed at all. And I'll definitely point that out in game, if there's an opportunity. I'm sure there is, because I like actively maneuvering, clearly. But this ship is very impressive, and control a lot of people's aim, because it's almost like it's accelerating through its turn. So I'll make sure to highlight that in game. But keep that in mind, that you do have a big mitigation factor, which is going to be when turning and you're actively maneuvering, you can throw a lot of ships' aim off by doing that. Though it is a gamble, you have a big Citadel, but I wanted to point that out right out of the gates, because it is a very much a big, strong factor when it comes to the Monmouth and the Gibraltar. Going into the main battery, this is the 234mm guns, kind of similar on what you see on the Goliath, which is the Tetri counterpart. But the difference between this and the Monmouth is that the Goliath gets the triple-barreled gun mounts for 12. This gets 3 quads, which arguably is better when you're just going nose in. But again, if you get one turret knocked out, that's a lot more firepower getting knocked off the ship rather than like the Goliath. So keep that in mind too. what else is there to talk about with this ship, with its guns? Obviously, you have a reload of 13.6, which is like Zhao levels, essentially. Not the best, but not the worst. 25.9 degrees of 180-degree turn time, or like a second, sorry. And then your range is quite insane at 19.8 kilometers of range. And again, has access to only armor piercing, which is 5,850 with an initial velocity of 840 meters a second. Now, interesting enough about the Monmouth, I think we need to talk about this. The Monmouth's AP shell compared to that of the Gibraltar is a little bit, it's heavier and it has less air drag, with improved ricochet angles of 60 to 68 degrees, with a higher threshold for AP to pen/detonate within the target. I think you had a minimum threshold time of 25 millimeters, and then your fuse time is 0.033 seconds. This is obviously different from the Gibraltar when it comes to the armor piercing, because the Gibraltar has even more, different ricochet angles of 60 to 75, which is very impressive, kind of like Minotaur levels there. Um, but the main difference is going to be that the hardness of the shell of the Gibraltar is a little bit higher at 2,950 compared to the 2,800, and the shell hardness is essentially another word for that. Maybe you would be familiar with is Krupp. And then the impact angle is going to be a little bit steeper at 11.4 degrees on the Gibraltar rather than the 8.1. So what does this mean? Usually that means shells that are coming in at a less impact angle are going to have higher penetration. And that we do indeed have. If we go to a standard range around 16 kilometers, the penetration on the Monmouth guns are 298 millimeters, almost 300 millimeters of effective penetration, while the Gibraltar only gets 200 millimeters of effective penetration. And again, the threshold, though, because we have a short fused AP on the Gibraltar at 0.005 seconds, that also means that the threshold it needs to penetrate is going to be 12 millimeters. So the Gibraltar can absolutely bitch slap destroyers. I'm sure you've seen videos on it previously, and it's no joke. The ship can do that. But this begs the question, with the whole Italian heavy cruiser line out and other various SAP firing cruisers, why not just play a ship that has SAP? Because you're going to get, I guess, more consistent and less buggy ricochets every now and then when you're using those guns. Though I understand the draw. Obviously, the Minotaur is known to fuck up DDs. But that, again, that's my one concern, especially when you have these big heavy cruiser guns. It just seems like the Venezia SAP would be a little bit more, I don't know, beneficial, which again is another reason maybe to not invest in the Gibraltar. But I'm one of those weird guys. I did. And I actually quite like the Gibraltar. Overmatch for both guns, because you have 234 millimeter guns, is coming in at 16 millimeters. So your super lights like your Smolensk, your Colberts, your Jinan, ships like that, you can go right through the nose and sit it out, which it is actually easier to do with that of the Monmouth, because again, your shell, your impact, not your impact speed, what is it? Your impact angle is a little bit less, especially when you get to closer ranges. So, which is super nice. All right. Going into some other things in regards of the differences between the ships. One thing that sucks in the Gibraltar, as I'll showcase you, is because you have that smoke screen, you have that high smoke firing penalty, you actually don't have any torpedoes here. Yeah, a lot of empty space sitting on this ship. But with the Monmouth, problem solved. You actually have your torpedoes that are built into the hull, which is going to offer a little bit more protection. So if battleships decide to push you, you can actually defend yourself a little bit. These are the 2x4 533 millimeter torpedoes, 10 kilometers, 16,700-ish damage, 62 knots with a 1.3 detectable range. Hey, they're torpedoes. You know what I mean? Like, you get 4 of them, one launcher of 4, which, as we know, the quad launching torpedo dispersion angles, or whatever the fuck you want to call them, sucks ass. I've talked about this like the entire time on my channel. I don't know what it is. The quad torpedoes are terrible. They always create battleship sized gaps. I think the best torpedoes are either your quintuplet, which is your 5, or even your triples are just better. But yeah, you get those, and remember, because you're Royal Navy, you can actually single launch these puppies, which again is going to be. It is. I find myself using more single launch in the Monmouth, just because usually it's when battleships are pushing me. I want to make sure I get as many torpedoes to land on target to give me that kind of like safety net threshold, knowing that maybe it's one well placed AP salvo away from winning the engagement, kind of thing. So. And then the last thing, A is not worth talking about. It's going to go right there. Your A is pretty much ass. Is your concealment values. I believe I do have the concealment no, I don't actually don't. I'm actually that's going to get to that. It actually is a stock 14.14 kilometers detection C. Go ahead and take the commander skill and get it down to like 12.7. But it is worth talking about because I actually do not utilize the concealment module. And that's because I want to make sure I go and I take my double rudder shifts because it's going to allow me with that improved acceleration and active maneuvering to mitigate as much damage as possible. So as you can see, these are kind of what I have listed. I think this is a pretty typical. The only thing I haven't done, which is purchase the hydroacoustic search coal upgrade, I went ahead and recommended that because I do think that is the superior play. Because you want to make sure you have that up, especially because you're going to be actively maneuvering. This ship excels mainly around that 16 to 13 kilometer range, more on the side of 16, and then as the game progresses, you can go ahead and be more aggressive and get up in the fray of the battle a little bit more, just because the hull is not very tanky at all. Yes, you can get your ricochets on your smaller caliber AP, like your battle cruisers, like your A gears and all that, but the second you cross that threshold of 406 millimeters, you could still ricochet your 406s, but once you get to like the 420s and the Republic, it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit harder, especially the Republic at the 430 millimeter mark and higher. They're basically going to laugh at your 30 millimeter upper belt. So know who you're fighting, know the gun caliber, and then obviously angle accordingly. Again, though, it's not hard because your hull is shaped kind of like that ellipse to pinpoint and citadel right under those front guns. It's not hard. Again, I'd highly recommend you don't go directly nose in because that is basically saying shoot here for citadels because the citadel is so massive on these ships that you will actually get citadel ribbons against you if you go ahead and do that. All right, guys. So that is, in a nutshell, the Monmouth. Hopefully, I did a good job of kind of illustrating what this ship is and highlighting some of its statistics on what this ship is. And let's go ahead and check out what this ship can do in battle and talk a little bit about her in the battle. Alrighty, guys, and here we are in battle with the Monmouth. I'll go ahead and refresh your guys' memory up there with the upgrades and the captain skills. Keep in mind that the upgrades here, I'm not taking defensive AA fire, nor would I recommend that. I would highly recommend you guys go ahead and slot the hydroacoustic search. So that is my bad. Sorry about that. Obviously, the captain build is pretty self-explanatory. With all the skills that I am taking, I want to make sure that I bolster all my consumables by one charge. I want to make sure that I make my gun reload faster while in my base detection, and then I obviously want to go ahead and buff the armor piercing with taking that hard, that heavy AP skill. What is it, like buff it by like 5% or something like that, my overall damage numbers. So which is, again, is all pretty self-explanatory. Obviously rocking this like what is this, some Rogue Wave Halloween skin that I got. And I was like, fuck it, I have this, I might as well sauce it on the Monmouth. But yeah, guys, the Monmouth, a couple things I didn't talk about in the port screen. One, I'll go ahead and mention it right now, would be the turret firing angles. Just like the Gibraltar, the number 3 turret is its firing angles are brutal. Almost play the ship like you don't have it. If you do happen to or do want to use it, which I do think there are times and a place to go ahead and utilize that number 3 turret, pick your spots, because the second you expose your 3rd turret, you can definitely get citadel and schwacked out of the battle. But yeah, pretty much horrendous firing angles on the rear turret there. Obviously, even when you're in the kited position, the firing angles are tough to work with, so you're going to have to make sure that you are knowing and timing the reloads of the enemies, knowing where the enemy heavy hitters are, like battleships and battle cruisers and super cruisers or whatever, know where they are, and make sure you time your swivel appropriately. Another reason why I'm buffing and doing the double rudder shift mod, again, is to help mitigate that factor of the ship. So, another thing too is the heal on this ship. This is an improved super heal. And the improved heal on the ship is actually very respectable. For the Monmouth's heal, you actually, it lasts 20 seconds. You can heal about 1,188 HP per second, and total healed is about 40%, and the cooldown time is 80 seconds. Now, what does this sound familiar to? This sounds familiar to that of the Minotaur, which again is going to last you 20 seconds, 866 HP healed a second, total healed of 40%, and cooldown of 80%. Yeah, like, That's awesome. That is very good. It actually seems to be a better keel than that of the Minotaur. So that's going to help with your survivability of the ship. So keep that in mind too. That's also another reason why I would probably say this ship is just better than the Gibraltar, because the survivability is just going to be there a little bit more in the forms of that heel. The Gibraltar is definitely crying in a corner because it's saying, "Oh my God, I have a smoke screen." That's like, yeah, who gives a fuck? Because your smoke firing penalty is 9.5. You only have AP only. So the chances of you getting in within those ranges to support your DDs are more likely than not going to be spotted by an enemy submarine and or a destroyer. So that's a topic for a separate video, but another reason why I think the Monmouth is just a superior design than that of the Gibraltar. Too bad the Gibraltar didn't just get a buff, rather than, we had to put in a whole new ship and sell it for doubloons. Does not feel good, that is for sure. Yeah, so, obviously we're in battle here with the Monmouth, and I'm going to be showcasing you some armor-piercing salvos that you're going to be seeing on enemy cruisers. This thing definitely loves to shoot at enemy cruisers. That is kind of this ship's role. I think it is definitely to counteract enemy cruisers and nullify them, because they're going to be showcasing a lot of broadside. Even when they think they're angled to you, they're really not, because you can still take full advantage of your improved AP ricochet angles. That is going to punish those cruisers heavily. But that being said, this ship does have something to say about battleships, as it can absolutely punish the enemy battleships. I think if we get in around 8 kilometers, 7 kilometers, we could have actually citadel this Yamato at this angle. Obviously, we're not in the 7 to 8 kilometer range, so we're going to go ahead and chunk upper belt, and we're still going to be doing 7 to 10k with its AP salvos. So battleships, don't just sail broadside to this thing thinking, oh, it's just another fucking cruiser, because that's not the case. This ship can and will slap you, and again, if it is close enough to you, it can and will citadel you. I think I've citadeled the Incomparable at least at 10 kilometers with this thing. And we know the Incomparable isn't really known for its citadel armor and has a massive citadel, and this as a cruiser can really devastate it. I would almost say this thing is attempting to be like a Royal Navy Stalingrad is kind of a good comparison to this thing. Obviously, it's not as nearly cracked out as a Stalingrad is when regards of its gun performance, but it's pretty damn close. So if you're on the receiving end of the Monmouth shells, I would still treat it like you're fighting a Stalingrad, in the essence that when you think you're angled, you're probably not as angled as you should be. So remember that fact, kids. Another thing I mentioned in the port analysis portion of the video is that this ship has torpedoes. And normally, as we all know, I'll just say this, torpedoes are probably the worst armament type in the game. They're very RNG dependent on their dispersion values in regards of like their spreads. And then their reload is pretty damn long, and I've seen people throw away their ship just to get their torpedoes off that inevitably miss because they're using the white indicator. So yeah, torpedoes, you really can't invest a whole lot of your torpedoes, and nor should you be investing any captain skills in the torpedoes. Believe me, it's a waste. Only one torpedo launcher. I've seen other players do as dumb things as investing in them. Don't do that. That's a waste. Please, please, please do not do that. But you have them, and what are they good for? Well, you're going to see a good example of that towards the end of the game, but these ships are definitely good for an anti-pushing kind of maneuver, especially if battleships think they're going to come around and bully you, which they absolutely can, and they should. Your final last laugh, so to speak, would be the fact that you have a torpedo launcher per broadside. This is going to allow you to do, maybe the necessary damage required to get them down to about a final salvo of your armor piercing, and you go ahead and finish them off with your guns. Your guns are definitely your bread and butter of this ship. It sure as hell isn't the armor, and it sure as hell isn't the torpedoes. So you want to invest in those guns and make the most use of the main armament on this ship. Obviously, you saw I went ahead and hit that Salem with a double citadel earlier on in the game. So you can definitely take advantage of cruisers. Cruisers, if you're engaging this thing, you have to be careful because of the improved ricochet angles and its hard-hitting armor piercing, guys. This thing can slap you, so be careful. One thing that hopefully you're seeing is the turning of the ship in regards to going hard to starboard or hard to port. This ship does not lose speed in its turn. It's freaking incredible. As you're seeing here, full turn, and our speed in knots is just not turning and not changing at all. You can definitely take advantage of this, and you should be taking advantage of this because this is the one way you're going to be able to really mitigate damage. It's not going to be in the forms of showing a sleek, slender profile. I mean, that should be a no-brainer, but then again, because you only have a 25mm nose on such a big hull, and again, it's shaped in an oval, you're really not going to mitigate as much as you think you are. And matter of fact, you're just putting a bullseye on your schnoz. If I were well, when I did play this ship, when I found success is when I kind of angled the ship. Even at ships that I knew that would overmatch me, I kind of tried having my 30mm plating go to work for me and go to war, while also giving that, 30-degree auto bounce ricochet angles. I really tried showing that 30-degree mark, or at least around that range, for to kind of tempt them to shoot that area, and that's how I'm going to mitigate my damage. You'll actually see later on in the video when I'm charging a Montana down, I actually do go nose in, and as what I basically have been telling you, you can kind of come to the conclusion on your own what the final result is going to be, because of that, because I went nose in. So just keep that in mind too, that this is a ship that does not like to be shot at. And again, that's like a lot of cruisers nowadays you're finding. I don't know why, battleships, citadels are underwater and you can't punish them as much, and they have like really trolley armor, but cruisers, fuck, go right in. Like, it's just all free real estate. This is obviously more of a game balance decision that Wargaming needs to come to and figure out a way to mitigate that. I've always been a full supporter of kind of putting those armor plating somewhere around the front or the ass of the ship so that it encourages active maneuvering to mitigate damage rather than just going nose in or having to dodge the entire salvo completely. I think overmatch has gotten insane in this game, and it's kind of almost killed a class in the essence that Wargaming really can't design just flat out cruisers anymore that are like your Des Moines and your Zao. They have to add stupid smoke screens or fucking super heals in order to mitigate the overmatch problem in this game. And I really wish Wargaming would just kind of throw around the idea of kind of adding those improved plating or something to help cruiser players out, to kind of revitalize the class, because right now it's one of those things where the vast majority of cruisers being released into the game are like, whatever, it's a cruiser, it can still get nuked in one-shotted by your Vermont and other ships like that, or it's like insanely busted because of its gimmicks, like the Svei, it has radar, short burst smoke, hydro, and like 30mm plating on a light cruiser. So it's like it's a hard thing to balance because Wargaming refuses to address the main concern or the main issue here. I mean, I understand that like there was a point where Wargaming, they wanted to encourage pushing because they more or less killed it. So I do like the fact that they have released more and more ships that at least can do that matter. The problem is that all these ships that they have released that are trying to fulfill this role are cracked out usually, and can, like the Schlieffen's crying in the corner because the Schlieffen, I mean, it still is a good ship, and that was the last video I did, but it's definitely, you can see as time has gone on, that ship has kind of gotten reined in because of the other ships Wargaming has released, in the forms of like the Sabir, the Libertad, and brawling at a Schlieffen that actually has clear, distinct weaknesses and strengths has really become, I don't want to say null and void, but like has really been power crept the hell out of because of those reasons. Again, Grosser Kurfürst is still crying in a corner with the poison holding his tissues. So, but yes, going back to the Monmouth, I know I keep getting sidetracked here because there's just so much shit to talk about sometimes in game that you kind of get sidetracked every now and then. Obviously, here's a good example of the AA doing pretty much nothing. And the Laffy, actually, with its defensive firing, AA fire up, it actually is incredibly respectable in regards of its AA aura. And I didn't do hardly shit. So unless that guy's shredding the planes and I'm just doing little chip damage here and there, that could be a possibility, but I definitely think it's in the form of the Laffy doing the vast majority of the work there, because the Monmouth and Gibraltar alike really don't have a respectable AA suite at all. And if you are an enemy CV player, go for it. Absolutely go for this thing, strike it, because it shouldn't be that hard of a kill for you. There we go. That is a Citadel again on the USS Salim. Obviously, he wasn't angled enough. He was kind of, caught between a rock and a hard place, and a Zao. And the Zao go ahead and torpedoes the Salem's carcass because he was, panicking. So yeah, obviously this thing can do these flanking maneuvers. You have to be careful though coming around that corner, because I'm telling you, Even when you think, oh, I'm gonna get angled, I'm gonna be angled here in just a bit, they can still catch you and Citadel the living shit out of you because your Citadel is so fucking big. And this again is towards the end of the battle with the USS Montana licking his chops because he knows, oh my god, a Monmouth, dude, like I can nuke the fuck out of this thing because he's gonna absolutely nuke the fuck out of this thing. I'm only, what, a little bit lower than half HP. I've utilized all my super heals. I figured I have to put the pressure on the Montana. He's the last battleship alive, and I'm not really good at fighting destroyers, so I said, frick it. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. See if I can win this engagement. I think I get one AP salvo off. I do decent amount of damage. About 8,000, and then my torpedoes, hopefully, yep, they will go ahead and finish them off. And there's an example of going nose in, and you're getting absolutely eviscerated by a Montana of all things. So, and again, doesn't matter if you had 406 or not. If you had 381s, you could still do the same thing. Here's the final result in the battle, guys, with 179,199 battle with a 24,000 or 2,400, sorry, base XP value. Actually, a pretty solid game in the Monmouth. Nothing like that impressive. I was a little like, damn, if I would have gotten, one more kill, maybe I would have gotten the E rank, which I really tried to do. But hey, eventually it's gonna come. You can't force these things. So. But yeah, guys, that's basically the Monmouth in a nutshell of what this ship can do. And I will go ahead and go back to port here, and I will do my final thoughts on the ship for you guys. So doing my final thoughts on the Monmouth. So first things I want to address is this ship worth it? No. Absolutely not. No. For 26,300, I don't think the ship is worth it. Now, if your doubloons are absolutely burning a hole in your pocket and you want to spend spend that currency, and you have the coupon available for like the 25% off for Dubs ships in the armory, in the premium store or whatever, yeah, go ahead, fine. I'll go ahead and give my recommendation for it, though I still think there are better ships. And I still think, like, in general, you shouldn't be buying tier 10 special ships or premium ships in the armory in general. I think you should be going after tier 9s because tier 9s get the improved income and a little bit more bang for your buck there. So a little bit more of an investment. If you're doing this, you're kind of just like at end game and you have the resources and you just want the damn ship because it's like, fuck it. I have enough credits. I don't really worry about that. And I just want, fun ship. And the Monmouth is certainly fun. You can definitely troll a lot with her, with that armor piercing. It is quite potent. But again, it is still better than the Gibraltar. It's not even a question. At this point, I really wouldn't even compare the two ships just because the Monmouth is that much better. And then obviously you have the Incheon, which is like the big two ships that they added to the armory. And yeah, I would recommend this ship over the Incheon any day of the week. The Incheon, I think, is going to be a little bit easier to play. Because it has the smoke screen and it can create its own cover, but I think the Monmouth just feels a little bit more rewarding, especially when you put yourself in those situations to get those big alpha strike damage. And a lot of cruiser mains, if you're a cruiser main, you know what I'm talking about. It just sometimes ships just feel more rewarding when you get a really good game in them, rather than if you're just sitting farming in a smoke screen where your other ships are spotting for you and you're just laying down the sea of HE. So, but yeah, that's when I'd recommend the Monmouth for you for that. Obviously I talked about her strengths coming in the form of her armor piercing with her insane penetration on these 234 millimeter guns. They can go ahead and overmatch 16 millimeters of effective armor. So those pesky little HE spammers like the Genon, the Colbert, the Smolensk, to name a couple, you can go ahead and nuke them from anywhere part of their ship, especially when it comes to their broadside. My God. And then the maneuverability is top notch. You go double rudder shift mod, which is what I highly recommend on this ship. You can almost accelerate through your turns and not really lose or bleed any speed at all in the slightest with this ship. Obviously the big negative is the hull itself, and again, not having HE is really a downside nowadays in today's meta. I mean, obviously the armor piercing is good, but it really limits the potential of the ship because you don't have that easy button that can just free farm in no matter what part of the ship and do damage over time. This ship really can't do damage over time. It solely relies on its alpha, which is going to be more important impacted with its DPM because it can't set fires. The only form of damage over time it can do, I believe, is floods with its torpedoes. And yes, if you somehow manage to get into secondary range, your secondaries do shoot HE, and you can set the occasional fire like that. Of course, the secondary battery is almost non-existent, as you can see from the side of the ship. What do you have? 3 secondary batteries per broadside? Like, good luck with that, right? That's why I didn't even talk about them because it's really not even worth talking about. I think they're the 113, so like the daring level of guns. So really not worth talking about, guys. So anyways, guys, that is my final thoughts on the Monmouth. Hopefully you enjoyed the review. Hopefully we all learned something. Hopefully we had a discussion. We can still have a discussion about it in the comments down below. Feel free to write your opinion pieces on the ship, because I really would love to hear from you guys as a community. Anyways, guys, you all have a good rest of your day, and I will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and peace out.